So I've made a new material, and then I'm going to come over to base color map, drag out, go to general, and say bitmap. And in bitmap, I'm going to right click, or I'm going to go to, I used to have a shortcut thing, but I didn't install it yet. So I'm going to go to, not clients, I'm going to go to, wait, actually that was the right drive though. Drive, ACC classes, spring, VGA1, week 2, which it's week 3, but that's fine. Open. And now I have this texture map inside of here. And it's not attached because that other texture that I just got rid of is attached to it. So once I have it, you need to make sure it's doubled. You know, your dots are around this, and this will show up. If I have this selected, it'll show up too, but that's a different, if I ever put more than one material type on there. Also, I can be like having this selected and have, or different ones selected. You just need to make sure the double dot, or the dotted line, the marching ants line is there. Once you do, you just do assign material to selection, the little arrow picture sphere to the selection, bam, and you say replace it because I just overwrote the old one, and bam. And without even then I close this, and without even changing anything, those cuts already work perfectly, again, because I cut them, or I built it correctly inside of Photoshop. So that's the big to do. Now, when we start building this, what we want to think about is how much do we want ZBrush to fight with us on? And how much do we not? Now, remember I told you last week, or we talked a little bit about, when you're working in ZBrush, you make everything. Well, that's what we're looking at here. Instead of trying to make a brush, make this and just break these all off into their own pieces and leaving it at that, I'm actually going to cut up every brick and make them their own element of the same object. Because it's much easier to sculpt on the edges of a brick that's next to another brick and make it look like it's a brick sitting on a brick than it is to try and carve in and get everything straight. This way you're focused on the elements of what you're building. That's what ZBrush and other things are doing now that we're getting further and further along. And that's also a great reason to have a trim seat so you don't have to do it 14 times. All right? So if I look at this, I'm going to look at this piece right here. I'll go to poly mode, and yeah, okay, it's set up to red. If you ever want to get that red off, by the way, it's F2 is the shortcut to get that off. I'll turn that off for now. So I want these all into separate elements, meaning that I don't want to, I've seen people totally break them apart into 100 pieces. I don't like doing it that way. I was thinking about that today, and I'm trying to think, 1 second, hold on. I mean, there's been bonuses and everything. I just like to keep it all as one object, and I'll show you why for when we get into ZBrush, I think, and then I'm going to regret it. So I'll take this one. I'm going to take every other one, because that's the easiest way for me to detach them, but not have to attach them one at a time. So if I take this one and this one and this one and this one and detach them, these three will be separate from these three, and these three aren't or four aren't touching, so it doesn't matter. If I do like this one and this one to detach it, it's only going to detach these two from that one. So if you think about every other when you're detaching, that's a really fast way to break polygons off of other objects and keep them separate. So I'm going to come up here and say detach. It's going to give me the question, do I want it as a separate object? I'm just going to say element, and we'll see if I regret it, and say okay. Alright, so now if I looked at these and I grabbed one, it would be separate object. If I hadn't done that, before I did that when I pulled them, no, before I did it, there, when I pulled them, it took them with them. So we don't want that, we want the previous. And of course, so let me go to this last one, detach as element, and it'll also keep where you were. So now I have these separate pieces. So now I'm going to come through and do just this one. Again, I'm going to turn the F2 off. And I'm going to look at this one, and it's probably cut in half. So I'll go to 2, grab this, do that, cut it in half. These are where it gets a little tricky, right? So what you could do is, and here's where maybe breaking into pieces would be better for now. Let me think about this. What I'm thinking about is if I cut this edge to this edge, there's a chance I'm going to grab this element. So what I can do is not have to worry about that. I can just do this and then go Alt-R, right? And it goes only there. And how do I know? Because that's not attached to this one, so it won't go through a broken element. It just goes through the one element you're in. And then I can try and do stuff like connect and then do 2 because I see 1, 2, and maybe 3. 3 is going to be a little bit more of a dance, and I could just pull them out a little bit, or I could just do it like with the Swift loop and just cut, 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 and cut. Okay. So, yes, I have extra polygons where I don't need them, but that's fine. We can get rid of those. It's easy enough. Once this piece is a separate piece, it's easy to get rid of that edge. So, again, we're going to go back to detaching. And what we're going to do is detach this one and this one. And then if I do this one, it probably is going to leave these two verts connected. So I can't do those. Or even if it was that one, it's actually not even that one anyway. So I'll just attach and leave as element. And then I'll grab this one and detach it. And what you can do is go to element mode and you can see what's grabbing. There you go. These are still all attached. So this one and this one detach. And then this one and this one detach. Now I can go element. Yeah. So they're all separate. So basically what I'm going to do is build these like bricks. So the easiest way to do that, actually it's funny enough they changed it. But let me see something. Shift and drag. Ooh, that's kind of cool. That's new. Like I told you this already. It used to be you just shift and drag and it would make a duplicate face. But when you want to do this, it would be a whole different setup, and this is much faster. So in this case, I'm going to pull. Actually, unless they need to be separate, I think I can just pull them all because they're already separate objects. So all I need to do now is shift and drag them out. Because now I've got, if I go back to element, I've got this whole thing as an element. So it's a separate brick with all the edges and everything. One thing you have to understand about 3D, about high-res stuff, which is what we're prepping for, is we don't need unwrapping. Don't worry about the unwrap. High-res is not for unwrapping. High-res is for stuff, is for just making the high version. So I'm going to grab this one right here, and there's another trick you can do. You can say by angle. That way when I grab it, it always grabs that hole even though it's cut by 2. And then I'm just going to move them around just a little bit, just to give me a little bit of flavor. Maybe pull this one out a little bit. Not much, just something to break the space up a little bit. Something like that. Yeah. And if I turn my wireframe off, maybe. Oh, that's right. The shortcuts for Camtasia are the same shortcuts as I use for that, which I've got to change. Okay. If I turn my wireframes off, I'll just do it the old-fashioned way. Display edge faces. Okay. You can start to see that they're breaking out a little bit. It's not a big deal. It's just enough. The cool thing about the mapping is it tells you, you know, you can see it visually right away. So, and if we turned off the mapping, you'd start to see the breakout. So I've got one done. That's it. That's all we're looking to do with that one. We'll come back and decide if we're going to divide them before we bring them in ZBrush, but that's pretty much it. This one isn't even, so I'm just going to go ahead and use Swift Loop on this one. Just go straight across to there. I'll go to there on this one, there on this one, and there on this one. And then we'll come back to, not element, but poly mode, and turn off my angle, snap, do this one, and I know this one doesn't touch, so I can do that and just attach. I wish the attach was in my left hand menu. I gotta make a shortcut for that. Actually, I guess I don't, because the new shortcut system's pretty good. Alright, detach this one from that one, and then I think all I have to do is attach this one from that one. And if I move this out, and if I go back to 5 for element, yeah, they're all separate. Okay, same thing. I'm going to come here, look at this one, go like this. Oops, I'll do it this way. This. And shift drag it out. And I can keep it the same height or whatever. This way at least you know they're different. Really easy when you have no textures on them. Okay. On to the next one. So this one is interesting. We've got this curve, so we got to figure that part out. And then we have these other smaller curves too. So, you know, it's funny because this is not part of it. When you see this, that's the stretch texture. Do y'all know why this looks like this, by the way? Can anybody explain to me? I put it that way.
Because on the texture map, it's like that part of that geometry is like, instead of being flattened, it's like, I guess, like 3-dimensional. So it's just all on the same exact spot, like the whole plane. So the texture just is like the same pixel repeated over and over.
That's exactly it. Yep. It's everything in texturing has got to be flattened out. So when you pull this pixel out, it's stretching this last pixel infinite. So I mean, when we unwrap it, it fixes it, but we don't need to unwrap these. So just so you understand what you're seeing there, that's just that last pixel. That's why this is white and this is gray and this is darker, because it's just the last pixel that happened to be dragged, and there it is. So yeah, if you see this, that's just that last pixel that it grabbed and it went through there. So for this one, you know, there's a few ways to do it that I do curves. So I'm going to look at it from this side, and I'm going to cut it in half. First, I'm going to give the easy cuts where I can see that it's a separate piece. I'll do the vertical ones in a minute, because these all bend in the same way. I'm not worried about the vertical ones until I start worrying about breaking them apart. So I'm going to go back to edge mode. Doesn't really matter. By the way, that's the great thing about Swift Loop is it doesn't matter which mode you're in. You can be in poly mode. You could be not even in a sub-object mode and cut. Turn on Swift Loop, and then I'm going to go one there, and then what I might do is put one right in the middle real quick, just because it can, and that way I can cut easier without having to fight with the edge right there. And then I'm going to cut one right there. Anybody, was somebody about to say something? Okay, so you can see that I'm off, and I'm not worried. If your picture isn't perfect, you still know what you're trying to do. You know, if one writes, the thing is, if it's right here, it's right here, even if the picture isn't. So just remember, the picture is just the example, not the perfection. Okay, so there's a couple ways you can do this. The easiest way, the way I like to do it, is I cut it right down the middle, and then I'll cut it right down the middle again, and I probably could just do it with an edge loop or with a connect. And I'll go right down the middle on this one. And then I'm going to grab this one, that one, all the middle edges, and pull them out. Because what it does is it makes this, you know, up and down zigzaggy thing. So I've got that. Let me go back to my material real quick. If you do put a new material on it, make sure you turn the roughness up to 1. Otherwise, you get shiny. With it down to 0 or anywhere. Anytime there's a rounded edge, you're going to get this shiny. It's not going to do it now because I'm talking about it, but you'll get a shiny edge. So if you put this up to 1, it's just flat. That's why. There. Okay, so I've kind of got it. But it's still obviously jaggy instead of circular. Well, I probably want to bring this one out again a little bit further. And maybe these are a little too far out. You know, it's up to you if you decide to use this one, how far you want them to be. But once I have those, does anybody have an idea how I can make it round? Chamfer. Yep, chamfer, magic. Chamfer. Now, they changed chamfer, so I like to go back to tries. Even though it doesn't make it tries, it just doesn't, it does what I'm expecting. You can try the other ones if you want. But there you go. Now I'm pulling it in, and you can start to see that it's rounding it. Like this one. This one's better than this one, and we can also add more subdivisions, which will give us a little bit more to breathe with, and we'll go 2 maybe. And then we'll see if we can do it that way. Probably what we want to do is I'm going to deselect this middle one and just worry about these rounded ones here. And I'm going to pull these up and try and get them nice and round, just to get a good start for where I think they should be. And I probably need to redivide these separate anyway, but yeah. So now I've got those pretty good. They may not be perfect. If I want to, I can, now that you'll see that these 2 outer ones are selected, I can actually just go to transform and change it to 1 and see. Well, I'll probably have to do them each individually. Come think of it. Hey, stop it. Stupid lock. I probably can just pull this out so it's got a little bit more, or I can, you know, keep playing with it and model it. Don't forget that just because I'm showing you shortcuts doesn't mean there's not going to be any modeling. There's always some modeling to make it a little bit better. That's where the art comes in. So I'll just pull this out a little bit. Those are pretty good. And then this one, I might leave that one more sharp like that just for the feel. And then I'll come back to this one and do that same thing, chamfer, but now I don't want it to be so short. I want to pull it out, because the farther I pull it out, the more it'll smooth towards that final position, this position. So if I turn this up, you'll see this is pretty good, but I'm not sure if I like, and if we look at this, I think this one, if you look at my drawing, was planned on being further out, but I've already got it kind of bending. How do I fix that problem? The cool thing is what we're seeing by default is actually still only grabbing one edge. So if I want to make this thicker, I can just keep pulling it out, make it wider, I should say, or deeper, and then pull it back in and pull it out. You know, you can go really far, pull it back in, and you'll see it finds a medium. You can get this just the way you like it. You don't have to worry about going back and fiddling with it. That's my goal for life, is to take as much of the fiddling out as possible, so I can play games or something. It's probably still too much, then you pull back and maybe turn this down. You know, sometimes it's easier to get that first position. Just the more subdivisions you have, the further it pulls it back. So pull this back a little bit, like that. I think that was pretty good area amount. And then I'll just divide it, and I got something like that. And I can always, like I did with the other ones, come back here if I want this to have a sharper curve at the bottoms. I can just scale them up just a little bit, and then these two, scale them up. Oops. And scale them up. So I've got a nice curved surface right there. So those two are done, sort of. Now I got to deal with the subdivision. So if I look at this one, it might be easier, in fact it would be easier, to break off all four of the hump areas. So I probably should have done that before, but I didn't, because I'm not so smart. So I just do that. And also I don't mind making mistakes, because you can see that most of the mistakes I make are just not a big deal. And there's so many times you're going to be asked to redo stuff that it's just like a mistake. It's just not your mistake that you're fixing. Okay. And then we'll take those two and I'll just attach them. Okay. And then now this should be its own. This should be its own. And this one and this one. They're all their own. And there's a reason I'm doing that, because I do want this one subdivided through here, but I don't want these. I want these also subdivided after that too. And in all honesty, I may not even need to do that. I could have left this just by hand, just, you know, do these inside of ZBrush, but whatever, we're here, so let's do it. So I'm going to take, where am I on that? I'll take this one, and I should be able to see what I get for connect. Flip it off, so in theory I should be able to say plus, then I can come over to this side and see if it fits, and it doesn't, but now I have the whole pieces here. So it's just, let's see, 2, turn this to 0, and see, yeah, they actually work pretty evenly. It was just this one's a little off, which worries me, but it's, again, perfection is while we're here. Okay, so say okay, and then I could just come up to this one, and what I might do in this one is, since I'm not going to put the subdivisions on the one above it, I'm just do it here, I might just Control Alt or Control Backspace to get rid of it. That way I can grab all of these edges here like that, the whole thing at once, and maybe I can get lucky enough to get myself happy with the subdivisions I do this way. Let's see. And we know it's even, we know they cut correctly, so sure. We're going to say yes. And then this one, Control Backspace, and then grab this one, Alt R to grab the whole ring, and then do connect again and see if this one's a little bit smaller. I think they're bigger. I mean, so I can move them. Yeah, they're a little bit bigger, so it gives us some break in the feel. So there we go. Okay, now in theory I should break every one of these apart. I'm not going to do that in this video or in this because I don't want you all to fall asleep completely, but I will grab this one. And by the way, sometimes it's easier to go 5, grab everything, and then go 4, which means you're back to polygon mode, and use Alt and deselect and deselect. And then, again, it's just attach and keep them as elements, and now you have those all as elements. And if these are annoying me, which a little bit they are, I can go back to vert mode real quick and just grab all of that face right there. They're a little bit out too far for right now. They probably need to be that far out when I export them, but for now they're fine. Okay. So those are all broken up. I have one broke for this one, which, okay, so what I'm gonna do is tricky on this one.
Are you going to divide it in line with the other divisions?
Well, they already are, so this is its own piece.
Or I mean, like the lines of like the parts above and below that, you can divide them in the same divisions as the previous ones, so that when you take it, take the whole chunks, or would you divide them separately?
So these two down here, I would do the same thing that I'm going to do here. I'm just deciding if I really want to do this, and if I don't want to do this, it's good for you. This may be one of those ones that's easier just to carve the channel in than trying to extrude it, or you just take one of them in to ZBrush and you duplicate it. The problem right now I'm looking at is what I really need is to close this end off. So like take this out, close it up, close up this side, put it back, take that one out, close it up, because I can't really shift drag it because it's not, I guess I could. Alright, we'll just do that then. Let me see. I'm not going to make you do the upper ones. We'll just do the lower curve one or something. You don't have to do every one, but do most of them. I'm just going to grab this one and this one and this one since they're all separate and shift and drag. And then what I can do is come back to here, go to 2, grab this edge. Yeah. This edge. This, come on, work with me. I think I'm missing one, and we'll do this edge, not that one. And, well, I can do one here. And then all I'm going to do for these edges is go, since I know that the Y is this direction, if I push Y, it'll flatten them. Then I can pull them back. If I did it right, apparently I did not. So wait, Y is not, that's funny. See, here's another thing that happens if you don't reset Xform sometimes. It will think it'll think the wrong direction. So you just have to test them. That one's going to the center, so they put them together. This one is probably the right one. Yeah. And then you just pull them forward, and now you've got all that. This one, and this one. And do Z again because for whatever reason it thinks that's Z. It's probably because of the way I built it. Okay. And it may not, yeah, and I don't have this one yet. So I'll do Z again and then pull it forward. I'm just finding another way of thickening this up. And these are some of my favorite buttons right here. This and then these edge controls when I'm working inside of poly mode. So there you go. More or less looks okay. Perfect now, but it works. These will divide nicely. You get brick breaks and everything. Then I'll come up to this one. This one doesn't have a break, and that's okay. All we have to do is make sure it's a separate piece. It is. We're good. We'll come up to this one. And what I would do, even though this doesn't have a separate break, actually come back to this one. I need to do a couple things on this one before I move on. I need to give it the border and the border. I don't care about this. I just want these two borders because they're straight set up. So again, they used to have a shortcut for this, but I think they changed it. So I'll just click on it, go to Swift Loop, grab that one, and grab that one. And again, Swift Loop and grab the middle. And this is pretty much all of your homework, by the way. You aren't going into ZBrush this weekend. Take the time and do it right. Take this, Now, here's the thing. Okay, so if I pull this out, and you know what? It depends on if I want to make that rounded or straight. If I want to make it straight, meaning that they're just like cubes with rounded edges, when I extrude them, I could just do a simple, I'd use bevel, and that bevel goes obviously too much. So what I usually do with bevel, I love the bevel tools, I say 0, I pull it back as far as I need it to go, like let's say that much, just to give me a border, and then I say plus, because it adds another bevel, I change this to 0, and then I pull this one in, and then lift it up, and you get a built-in chamfer for what you're looking at there. And I can, you know, divide it however many times I need to get to that chamfer. There we go. So that works. And then this I would leave alone. I would not necessarily. I probably would break this face off. What's up? Oh.
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize I was muted.
No, you're fine.
So I'm kind of like working on mine at the same time while and
That's
doing math.
okay, no problem. Okay, so you know, and you can always come back in and divide this if you really wanted it to be rounded. We could have done it the other way, but we'll leave it that way. Now I'll come up to this one, and this one's a little blurrier, but what I drew it does is it slopes out, bevels back in, and then kind of has a diagonal to this point. So I probably just need to figure out where I want the cuts first. And this one will be a little bit more work, but since it's a separate piece, it's not too bad. Back to Swift Loop, grab that edge, probably do the bevel, the middle of the interior one, and then the outside edge here. Again, I'm ignoring the actual sculpty stuff inside of here because the goal is you build one and duplicate it. That's so much easier than trying to do a stamp or any of that stuff. Double click on it. Oops. Oh, I'm on that way. Double click, and then we'll probably these. I don't see these two as the same distance, but I usually start together, and then I'll drop this one and pull this out a little bit more, and maybe even a little bit more from both. Okay. And then I take this one, and I do my chamfer. And that's too much, obviously. And maybe I could do them separate real quick. Just remember, I try to do them together because this one is going to end there. So if you're going to do one that's going to meet up with another one and you want to do them separate, which is totally fine, just make sure that however much room there is here is how much room you want to leave here. So if I pull this up, I know I can't go any further, and that one already compromises right there, so I can pull back on that, or so I'm just gonna kind of leave it basically wherever the chamfer stops, it goes straight. So from there to there, it's now straight, but that's not a big deal because I'm gonna round this edge. So I'll say plus, and then I'll grab this one, and then obviously it goes less, and there I get that kind of thing. And actually I'm gonna back up. Yeah, and I'm gonna pull this one back. I want it, oops, one more. Pull this one back because I want it deeper. I want it to have more of a dramatic swoop up and out. So then I'll say plus, and then I'll come back to this one, and then pull it back. So I got, you know, a nice pushing out and then swooping in. If you want to divide that one, you can too. I'm not super worried about everything being divided. You can do these under pieces divided easier. You know, these are going to be separate pieces, so you can even do it inside a ZBrush if you had to. Or if you need to re-import it, since these are going to be separate, it's not a big deal if you want to change something on this and re-import it into ZBrush. Okay, so now we're on to this one. Hello. And this one goes out, and that's the big thing. You have to know if out is right or left, so out, and then back in, and then flat. So pretty much the same stuff. We're doing the same thing over and over again. I would do a Swift Loop. I would cut it here. I will cut it here. And then probably I'll do it here because I want that hard edge to stop. But then I'm going to take this edge, get out of there, and back to 2. this edge, that's one of the things I'm not used to about Swift Loop is I can be in anything. So usually when I'm cutting in edge mode. But I'll pull this back a little bit. I'll pull this forward a little bit. And then we will take these two and do chamfer. Turn down the amount. My other class has no respect for you. This class. They always bug me when I'm teaching. Okay, because they're graduating. It's like they've got crazy time or something. Hold on.
Man, I'm graduating, but I'm not reading this class.
They don't know. I'm sure they forget. They're all panicking about the art stuff because we're doing their stuff, as you know. Okay, so I've got that. That one's good. Now this one, I did it so it's more flat. It's got a little bit of a curve, then it goes straight, and then it's curved. So again, it's just about cutting up and getting it the way you want. So Swift Loop, probably there, probably in the middle of the bend, and then probably here to protect it, and then there and there. So I got to think this one through. These two should go out because they'll be going outward. This one and this one need to stay the same wherever they go because it's a flat area. This one probably goes in like that. And then I may not even round this one. I think I'm going to keep that one straight and just do a round on the bottom one to make our lives a little easier. Pull that out, maybe a little bit less. Doesn't need to be much because we are going to subdivide it. Pull it up a little bit. Oh, there we go. And bam. Okay. So all these pieces are now subdivided into themselves. And again, if I cut them up, it'd be better. But here's some other things we need to do before we go forward. We need to build these pieces and that piece. So that's not too bad for these, especially because basically we go to the front view, we go out of the sub-object mode, we go to box, and we make a box. And then we come back into here, and we subdivide it, none real quick. Just, we can always add more. And then we pull it back, and really what we're seeing here is these go pretty close to the same, and maybe it's easier in the Photoshop. In my head, these are a little bit shy of the how far that one is. So I need to make sure either I make this the same height as this one, or I need to pull this out if I decide this needs to be longer. So I'll move this back into here, and then I'll pull this height back and see if I get enough information. Me. So I'm probably, I want to keep this, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, but I want to keep this a little bit more out so we get some more depth to it. And then I'm going to, so in this case, I'm going to take, oh my gosh, every time I have to figure out how to turn that crap off by default. I'll pull this out. Oh, I think I know. Actually, I just remembered. So if you want to get rid of the bounding box, which is an extra box so you know where everything is, and it's great for animation, but it's not very good for us, so you go to preview preferences, you turn off selection bracket, and then you say okay. And then maybe if I say save custom user interface, save. Sure, why not? Okay. Maybe it'll stick. Anyway, Max did a bunch of keystroke changes for us this round because they're so awesome. Okay, so this now, we can get rid of the back and stuff, we'll deal with that, but this right here needs to be from the front. I want to make anything that's going to be 3D. I'm going to just go ahead, I assume to drag it down to poly at this point. Push Alt-X so I can see through it. Anything that I do in 3D, I want that's a straight-on shot like these are, I want them to have a bevel, because normals don't read straight on, full-on, straight-on geometry. So like if it goes deeper in or pushes out and it's not beveling as it goes in or out, it's just going to look like a flatness to the engine. So what I do is I'll pull this up to here first, maybe get this really defined correctly, make sure that it's inside of there where I want it to be, and then I'll take that bottom stuff and maybe I'll just do the bottom here and pull it out to where I think it should be. So back to front, Z, okay. And then I'll go to the side, do the same thing, out this way, and then this side, out this way. Back to front, and there you go. Sure, works great. It's dandy. Okay, so I've got that one. Now all I have to do is shift, drag a copy. Actually, it looks like it's, I'm gonna make it a little bit wider. And maybe where I symmetried it, or, and it's not so clean. Maybe go to front. Okay. Now it's just duplicating it. And here's a trick that you may or may not know. If I move this all the way over here, and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And I move this over to here, and it comes up with this option. I can type in 22 and say go, and it'll move each of those over. Now in theory it should have been better, but it sucks because it's probably because of my piece, not because of anything else. So in this case I just got to figure where it starts going astray, and actually this may be better. It may be better to leave it this way and just change it to 23. That way they're all even. So if I come back to here, oops, shift to drag a copy of it and say 23. Say okay. No, that one's almost. Okay. So this one I am going to make shorter so it fits better. And then we'll try it again. Shift and drag probably to there. And then 23. Wow. So drastic of a difference. Okay. Shift and drag this one almost to there, but not quite. 23. And that's, now it's 24. As you can see, this is the fun stuff, right? So we'll do 25 and see what we get. So if we have to delete one, we can. There, now we delete two. Actually, that worked out perfect there. So 23 worked when I moved it just right. Now, I know it doesn't match the under thing, but now we know these are perfectly divided between themselves, that they are correct. Even if it doesn't match the picture that we hacked together, we know the important part is not the picture, the important part is the geometry. In fact, here, let me do this. That's the other thing you can do is grab it all, Alt X again, it goes back. Okay. So the other last thing is that on this one, it's got this one piece that goes through it. I'm a big fan of doing something like this. Duplicating it. Actually, I'm just saying one. Moving it over to here. Go into invert mode. Pulling this up like this. And then taking it and pulling it down like that. And then again taking this side here and doing this all the way over. Bam. And then we know this is not X, but if it was working correctly, X would make this, well, actually might work because it's a new piece. Yeah, so X does work. So we'll take this one and we'll go X and pull it in. Yeah. Okay. So I've got those. Just need to do the same thing for these. And you are welcome to interpret what those are. For me, they're just oblong spheres. So again, front Z, come in here, go to make as control right click. I'm trying to get used to my other shortcuts. Sphere, it out. Like that. A couple things you can do with this. Go to squash, 0.5. So it only uses half of it. But so you know when it uses half of it, it also uses the same amount of subdivisions. So if I go to 10, that's probably better. And then eventually I'll delete the back, but then I'm going to scale it. Let me do the Alt X on this a little bit more here. Scale it, and again, I have a really crappy image, so it looks like it's all the way in. Probably want to make sure it goes all the way in, so in this case, I'll actually do it this way. And then collapse to editable poly, since this way we don't have to do it. Easy way to get rid of the back face of a sphere or a cylinder is just delete the center edge. And there. And then we do the same thing. And in this case, we can just do, and you can do an array too, but this is just a quick array. There's an array option inside of tools. So let's try 30. Bam. What we're looking for is this edge difference here to be about the same as that one. So I'm going to do it a little bit smaller to there, and then say 30 again. I don't mind going over, it's easy to delete. And now it's too little, so I can never make my happy medium. So that was perfect, so we'll do this one. 33, fine. It's still not matching. Okay. Well, actually, I forgot. I missed something I meant to check. If I do this and shift and drag, shift control drag, yeah, it doesn't do the number thing, which I love. Okay. So
With the array, are you able to?
you can play with it. Yeah. You can just come in here to tools and array. I just love that copy. You can just type it in, and then you have to say preview, and then you have to say, in this case, in the x-axis, I want it to do. This is move. This is rotate. This is scale. So if I do this, you'll see that it does that. And then I have only set to 10. You want to make sure you say copy, by the way, and then say 33. Let's see what we get. And then we can come back to here and pull them in until we get to where we like. I'm gonna say 0.25. Nope, that was too much. 0.15. Still, so 1.1. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so front, grab everything, Alt X, yeah. Turn that off. Oops, stupid. I gotta change shortcuts in Camtasia again. Do this. Okay. So now, if we turn off the silly textures here, so M, all I'm gonna do is turn them off for now, like this, and then come back out. And we can see that I've got all the wall parts separated out. They should be ready to import in. Now here's the trick, that a lot of people say that you don't need like this edge and this edge because it's a tiling texture, but that's a different way of doing it. If I was going to use this for my final texture base or something, maybe. But since we're going to build our texture base after, because it's just a plane, the idea is that this texture, if I do, let me think about this for a second. Yeah, so if I take this, let me do this, and I'm going to go, in theory, this is before we go into ZBrush, mind you, so in theory, if I come into plane from front, and I type and I do this like that, and sorry, stop. There we go. And I type 400 by 400 like that, and then I export it. I think I'm still in here, aren't I? Yeah. Like that, and it has a UV on it because it's just a plane, and I grab everything right here. Now some of the stuff's not going to work because there's no diagonal edges to them, but before I even do anything else, watch. Let me make sure that I have that selected, everything, and then I just go export, actually, yeah, export, and we'll call this plane test. Oh, I put it in VGA3 again. I keep doing that. Plane test underscore high. Like that. And I take this one and I export it again. Plane test underscore low. And export it. Okay, and then I open up Substance Painter. Substance Painter actually has been the last couple days. It keeps crashing. I mean, hard crashing my system. I have to actually go into registry to stop it from being stupid. Okay, not like to fix stuff, but to tell it to forget that you ever were open. You weren't here. Open, not open. New, select, ACC, 21 Spring, VJ1, V3, we go to low, say OK, and now we're playing, and there's our unwrap too, so we know the unwrap works, and then we just bake it, in theory. Oh, shite. Hold on one second. There's one problem. Anybody know the problem we're going to have if I exported both of these?
They are not aligned to the same space.
Yes. ZBrush or everything needs to be aligned in 0, 0, 0. That way. Even if I put this over here, they need to be exactly the same position. So I need to take this one, and it's probably easiest to do this. This. Okay. Y'all know what he was talking about when he said that? About them being in the same position?
Kind of. Is it sort of like when you're you need to make like when you're importing into Unity, you need to make sure things aren't like randomly placed around the world or something.
Right, and it's the same thing as it is with Unity, yeah. So if you import something into Unity, it needs to be 0, 0, 0 to where for a character it's at the bottom, but it's always in the 0 world. That way if you bring it into Unity, say over here, then when the center point inside of this object in Unity is here. So when you rotate it, it's not going to rotate around itself. For Substance Painter and for ZBrush, they need to be in the same 0, 0, 0 spot. So if I take that one and I hide all, we have both of them in the same spot, we should be good. Export, just overwrite the old one. Hi, yes, thanks. And then the new one, or the low one, export, save, yes. And I'll show you in a second if those of you are still confused. Anybody else still confused about what I'm talking about, how they need to be in the same exact spot? Because they will not work if you don't do that. It will do something like you don't expect. You all got it? So if I gave you a test, you'd understand that?
So
I think we got it.
Cool.
I get the pivot points. So with ZBrush, you just need to make sure it's Is it the same 0, pivot, or?
I would say this for everybody who brings anything out of any 3D program ever for any game, whether you're going from 3D program to 3D program or 3D program to game and you make an FBX or you make an OBJ or anything, you should do two things before you export. Now, I'm not following the first rule. First rule is you should reset XForm, which means wipe all of its memory and how it was created and let it forget all that crap. And the second, which will also reset your pivot point or your axis. And the second thing you need to do is zero it out, which means it needs to be 0, 0, 0 in the world. Because if you don't do that, the engine is going to look at its pivot point, or ZBrush is going to look at its pivot point, and they won't line up, basically. So if I take this one and I bake it to the high, I'll show you by doing it wrong in a second too. You just say bake selected textures. Okay, so it worked. Everything seems to be fine. There's a couple of things we need to do to make the bake a little bit better, but we can try this one for one. There we go. Which we'll go over a little bit too. But basically, everything like this was all cut up, but since we didn't move anything, it's flat. Even though this is cut up and it's doing some stuff, it's still not working correctly. This works beautifully. Look at that. Without even doing any ZBrush work or anything, the high res and the low res line up perfectly. So when I bake them, it makes it feel like there is a curvature in. It feels like there's these bumps. It feels like this is in front of this, just like that image was. All that stuff is now believably working. This is pulling out and all that stuff. So once we put our extra detail in there, it works. So I'm going to show you the easiest way of what I was talking about, though. If I take this high-res one and I move it here, halfway, exactly halfway, and I re-export it, and then I come back to Substance and I rebake it, wrong button. I'm a big fan of getting rid of data. That's probably my years of fighting with Reset XForm. When I bake it, it's baking it halfway through. Because it's halfway in here, halfway of this is the thing it's baking onto. Since it's only halfway across that in Max, when I export it, it's going to be halfway across that in ZBrush. Or I'm sorry, in Substance Painter. And in ZBrush for that matter. ZBrush is its own nightmare. I would tell you that this is always consistent. If you don't have this in the same world, exactly the same position as you do in Max or wherever you exported it from, both pieces, then they won't bake correctly. This is an easy example, but you know, if you even went to the next extreme and said honk. Ah, you suck. Fingers. Oh, man. And then we bake again. I'll just leave the same one in there. Lo and behold, that high-res object is baked at an angle on here. Does that make sense now?
You didn't have it lined up right.
Right.
Yes.
The 0, 0, 0. Theoretically, you could. Okay. The real reason everything needs to be at 0, 0, 0 is not because of baking or because of ZBrush or anything else. It's because of Engine. There's two things you always want to do when you're bringing stuff into Engine or building stuff for Engine. You want to make sure it's zeroed out. Like if this was a wall, by the way, when I mean zeroed out, it doesn't mean their pivot points are lined up. It just means this is what it actually looks at. The FBX actually looks at this object center point of the world. It looks at the world center point when it exports it as an FBX. So when you make a wall, you always want to have the 0 point at the center. And sometimes we used to be like this. There's always this bottom left-hand corner, but this is the way we do it now. It's always the center of the world, and you know, all you have to do is grab one of them and say 0, 0, and this is a little bit off oddly, and we'll just say 200. It's still not lined up. but should always have this at 0, 0, 0. Probably this may be a problem because it's not X formed. And then we take this pivot point, we set the pivot point to 0, reset pivot point. Oh, it's not that. It's this line. Looks like it's the center of it, but it's really not. That's what's going on. So this pivot point, the center of this pivot point doesn't matter when you export. All that matters is this pivot point. And the thing is, when you bring stuff into a 3D or into a game engine, there's two things you want to always make sure. It's the correct scale, unless you're planning on having dynamic scale for the game or something. You always want it the correct scale. That means your characters need to be the correct scale. That means your environments need to be the correct scale. I know we can scale them in the engine. You don't want to do that. For two big reasons. One of them, because that means every time that object's used, the computer not only has to make it put into the world, but it also has to have the calculation of scaling every version of that to the correct number. So if you cut that off, it's makes the computer happier, it saves more time. So you always want to make sure it's the right scale when you bring it in, and you always want to make sure it's 0, 0, 0. Otherwise, there's a local pivot point inside of inside of Unity. There's a button that says local pivot point, and there's a button that says world pivot point. One of those is going to be on the object's pivot point, and that's the FBX import position. Even if you know the world you're making, you make all these worlds, and you have a house that's not at 0, 0, 0, it's off to the left and up on a hill or whatever like that, it's better to fix the position of it in the world than to bring it in the correct spot. It may seem like it's better in the beginning, but if you ever need to reuse it, then you're going to have to do it anyway. It's just the best practice is always zero things out until you have some boss who has a better way of doing it or the way you have to do it for them. Anyway, for us, for the case of this class, for this right away, it's just so when we bake it, it matches. So, for the homework, for everything you're doing, all you have to do is open up that program. Believe it or not, that's it. I'm going to stop recording now.